to order. The time is 1:30. We'll do roll call to get started. Ms. Alatel?
Here.
Mr. Weddleton? Okay. Mr. Schutte? Or Acting Mayor Quinn Davidson? Okay, Ms. Heil?
I'm present.
We have 3 members, and we have
Mr. Chair,
Chris.
Mr.
Yes.
Constant here.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I was just going to say, and we have an alternative, Chris Constant, so we do have a quorum. Craig, will you please do the public involvement?
Sure. AMATS committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. If we have a business item, we'll have presentation by staff or a consultant. After that, the committee will be given a chance to discuss it, and then we will go and make sure the public has an opportunity to comment. Since we're doing Teams Live, there is that slight delay, but we'll keep track of that. Christine will keep track of that and make sure we make sure they have an opportunity to comment. And I will note that Mr. Schutte has joined us as well.
Thank you. Okay, do we have approval of the agenda?
Mr. Schutte moves approval.
Second, Alatel.
Thank you. Do we have any changes?
Mr. Constant is on mute, but I do know he wanted to change the order of the day if we could to bring up.
I do.
There you go.
Thank you. I would like to ask you to change the order and do the update of the Sewer to Glen Highway PEL at the top. Thank you.
Okay, are there any objections to adapting the agenda with the changes? Seeing none, the agenda is approved with the changes of moving the item 6A to the top. For agenda item 4, we have before us the minutes from the March 25th, 2021 for approval. Do we have a motion?
This is move to approve. This is Cindy Heil.
Schutte, second.
Thank you. Any changes or discussion? Any objections? Oh, sorry. Hearing none, the March 25th, 2021 minutes are approved.
Weddleton is here.
Thank you, Mr. Whittleton. Let the record show 133, Mr. Whittleton joined us. So moving on to the action items. Before we get to the action items, though, we're going to move on to the change by moving item 6A up to the top, which is the Sewer to Glen Highway PEL. Greg, I don't believe you'll be presenting. I think this one's up to me, but I confirm.
I'm sure you're ready for that.
Very well. Very brief discussion that we had earlier. Last month we talked about the current contract being held up a little bit in the contract section. Since then, the negotiations have finalized within the department. The contract has been moved out of contracts and finalized. The project manager for the Department of DOT has approved and moved the contract out to the consultant for final signatures. And as soon as we get that document back with their signatures on it, which we don't anticipate being more than a few days, the contract will be ready to kick off. Are there any questions?
That's good enough. Thank you for me.
Very well. Are there any questions or comments by the committee? Seeing none. Any comments from the public?
We'll start a clock now. There are no public comments.
Thank you. Moving on to action item 5A. Action item 5A is the 2019 to 2022 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment. Craig, will you be presenting?
I will. Before I do that, though, I just want to remind folks that Christine has placed in the chat the sign-in sheet so we can get the demographic information from folks. So if you could hop in there and fill that out, that'd be great. And it's right in the chat, so it's easy to track down. So we have the tip out for public comment. We received 9 comments, and they are shown in the attached the comment response summary. For the most part, they were changes to tables that were relatively minor, and or they were changes to tables that were not part of the AMATS allocation. So we had changes to the transit tables, which are in this case mostly the 5307 funds that the railroad and the public transit department control, and some changes to the HSIP program, which the state of Alaska manages. And so they were asking if we can roll those in with this amendment. In addition, there were some suggestions from the Rabbit Creek Community Council. I think made 3 or 4 comments, and those are shown in the comment response summary. Christine, can you pull up that comment response summary? Come over to that. So there were, we had, let's see, there were 3 comments there by Rabbit Creek Community Council that we said we would share with the project managers at DOT, since those are the folks, you folks are managing those construction projects, and that's something that AMATS really has a role in terms of deciding if that is a design or an engineering thing that makes sense. So we said we would forward those comments along. There is the suggestion in the Mountain Air Drive project 20 in the roadway table that currently includes the language recommend separated pathway, and they suggested we change that to non-motorized access or something to that effect, and we suggested changing it. Staff suggested changing that language to say project will include non-motorized improvements, which is basically the same thing we say with the other roadway projects in the tip. So that was our suggestion on that one. The TAC heard these comments 2 weeks ago, and they agreed with staff suggestions on there. In addition, they had one additional change that is related to the Spenard Road project in the tip. So if you remember, there is language in the tip that on that project that says project shall not include improvements to the Minnesota intersection except ADA requirements on the east side. The TAC recommended removing that language. So that that's the only other change that was made. The status right now is once you folks, the policy committee has adjudicated these comments, we will make the changes, and then we will get this prepared to go through the assembly. They will make their recommendations as soon as we can get it on their agenda, and then the amendment will come back to the TAC and then to the policy committee for final approval as soon as it's done at the assembly level. Happy to answer questions. That's my report.
Ms. Alatel, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. On comment number 5, could you elaborate or indicate whether or not this project is on a safe route to school, or do we know that, just for the context for the comment received by Rabbit Creek Community Council?
I do not know if that is. I will have to find out. I don't think it is, because it's new construction, so there's nothing there right now, and I imagine my understanding of this that hazardous routes committee is that they only look at existing things, not necessarily looking at future projects. So since this is not a roadway that exists at the moment, I don't think that is in there. I could find out.
Thank you.
Ms. Heil, you were next.
Thank you. So Craig, am I correct in understanding that there was a project that was removed based on comments?
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. So project number 2 in the roadway table is the C Street Ocean Dock Road ramp and intersection improvements. This is a project that would be managed by DOT, of course. It's their facility, I believe. And so that project, I don't know the exact details. I'm sure there's someone on the phone who could tell you exactly why they're recommending it to be removed. But that's one of the suggestions that DOT had to remove that because anytime we either add or remove a project, we need to look at the air quality conformity analysis on that. We did share this information with the interagency air quality conformity team, and they, I'm not going to use the words correctly, Cindy can correct them for me, but they basically looked at it and said they were okay with the analysis that we had going forward, and that wouldn't tip the scales. So they
made a slight, they asked for and were provided some slight edits to the air quality conformity determination. So that draft air quality conformity determination didn't come before the group today, but it'll have to come through the TAC with that edit. And I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that we're making sure we're meeting the federal requirements by having our major amendment and the air quality conformity go hand in hand.
Yeah, that's a good point. So today we're just basically sharing the comment response summary. When amendment number 2 comes back to you, the first thing that you will see is the air quality conformity, because if the amendment doesn't conform to the air quality issues, then we wouldn't move it forward. So we'll have that first, and then you would have the TIP amendment after it.
Thank you, Craig. Mr. Schutte?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to the question from Assemblymember Zalatel, Bear Valley is a bus-only school. There are no safe routes to schools for Bear Valley Elementary.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Ms. Zalatel, or would you like to follow up?
No, that's great. Thanks, Mr. Schutte.
All right, thank you, Craig. Are there any comments from the public?
We'll start the clock. There are no comments.
Thank you. What is the will of the committee?
Move to accept this is Heil, move to accept the comments and their response, and moved the package on to the assembly.
Second, Weddleton.
Thank you. Are there any objections to approving this motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Agenda item 5B, the operating agreement update. Craig, will you be presenting?
I will. So this, if you remember last month, you had the memo, et cetera, the change on the changing the Citizens Advisory Committee to the Community Advisory Committee, and that change was passed. The TAC had this month the actual formal operating agreement change for that, changing the language from citizens to community. In addition, we have, as part of this modification, to change the percentages used to determine if something is an amendment versus administrative modification. Those are the two things in this document. When we brought this to the TAC, they voted to table the operating agreement changes. So, but as you know, a policy committee member asked to have this on the agenda, so it is here before you now. I will say that I was asked to check with our federal partners and see what their thoughts on operating agreement changes. This was a discussion that came about at the TAC on whether we were supposed to take the operating agreement change to them first to make sure they were okay with it, and then bring it back here to do the formal change of our operating agreement. The language that I had that came back from Julie Jenkins, who is the person who is filling in for John Laurie until his position is filled, said that she checked with their FHWA Office of Planning, and they said, we do not have approval authority to how the MPO organizes themselves and how their operating agreements work. So she basically said, you know, you guys can make it. We are not going to comment on whether that's a good change or not. So I do have some possible language that might help clarify the discussion that would be in section 19 on that. And I can bring it up now or wait to see if you folks have some, if you want to discuss it a bit or ask other questions, or however you want to do it.
Thank you, Craig. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
I guess, yeah, Weddleton, if we're, so, okay, so we're looking at your document, you changed citizens to community. What is this? Oh, there's a percent there. I'm sorry, so I missed that. Changes to the cost of a project would constitute a change greater than or equal to 50%. And what was it before?
It was at 75%. And just to be clear, when I put the 75% in, it was with the hope that we wouldn't have to do many amendments, because you know how long amendments take. And I found some MPO in I believe it was in South Carolina that had a 75% level. And during our review, their review of that, the feds, John Laurie said, if you can show us where someone else is doing it, we'll be happy to accept that. And of course, I was unable to track that 75% down, but I did find that Boston was using 50%. So I was able to share that with him. And he said, okay, so we'll be fine with 50% since you can show another MPO that has that number. So.
Okay, so if I could, so this makes it more changes would require a longer public process and policy committee approval. Is that correct?
Yeah, so administrative modifications, what used to be called minor amendments, they are something that the TAC can approve in some instances, but in the most cases, it's just as policy committee approval, and no public comment period is needed, except for the public comment that's available both at the TAC and the policy committee meeting. If you have a larger change, over 50% of the project over the 4 years of the TIP, then it requires the public comment period, and also requires that it go through the Anchorage Assembly.
So if I could continue, what is a practical difference here, though? So we lowered the threshold. Is that going to be twice as many come to us, or about the same?
Yeah, if the change goes from 75 to 50%, then you probably will have more amendments, which will take longer to do. And you know, the longer they take, the more challenge there is to make sure we can deliver the program in a federal fiscal year. So.
Was that a lot, or is it a few? I just don't have a sense. I mean, because we look at these, and I've never really calculated in my head what percent change it was.
Well, for example, with this particular amendment, we have all the comments, and as you saw, there are about 6 of them, and several of them were for the AMATS allocation. During the time that I gathered those different amendments, there was a project status meeting out at DOT where project manager said, oh, we need 200,000 more on this project, or we need 75,000 more on this project. So there were a bunch of changes in a relatively short period of time. If that was an amendment, then, and we didn't have an amendment underway at the time, that would start the clock of a new amendment. In this case, because those changes are minor, we can do those as an administrative modification. And if you look at our, I don't know what we're up to right now, but this is the second amendment, but we probably are at 7 or 8 administrative modifications. I think in the previous tip, we were probably up to 20 some administrative modifications and just a few amendments. They just take so much more time that we try to get them done as administrative modifications, because the challenge of delivering the program is just, it's great. And we don't want to lose our funds.
That's true. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments by the committee or questions by the committee? Seeing none. Any comments from the public?
We'll start the clock now. And no public comments.
Thank you. What is the will of the committee?
Move to approve.
Shooty, second.
Thank you. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Seeing none, the motion is approved. All right, Craig, are there any more action items?
No, sir.
Thank you. We will move on to project updates. We already did item 6A, so moving on to item 6B, Spenard Road project update. Craig, will you be presenting?
I will allow and happily allow Mr. Baskey, the project manager on that from DOT, to share.
Thank you. Mr. Baskey?
Yeah, am I coming across all right?
You
Yes,
are.
sir.
Perfect. I'll do the share screen here. All right. Ooh. Ignore all that. All right. Thank you for allowing the project team to come in and share. I've got a slew of other people behind the scenes that are available to answer any questions as we move along. My name is Sean Baskey. I'm a project manager for the Department of Transportation. And this would be the first time that you guys have seen the Spenard Road Rehab Project, Minnesota Benson. Quick history and background. So phase 1 and phase 2 of the Spenard Road Corridor Project were Municipality of Anchorage funded projects that took us to about Benson. They've got a long history of being jointly developed by the Municipality of Anchorage and the Department of Transportation. And both phase 1 and phase 2 being constructed. Now we're moving on to phase 3, AMATS funded.
Sean?
Mr. Shaw, Mr. Baskey?
Yeah.
This is Todd. Are you trying to share a presentation with us?
Did it work? It must
No.
not have. Well, there you go. I hit share. Technology is great, except for when it doesn't work. Did it work?
There we go.
Yes.
Got it now, Sean.
Great. And swapping. Okay. So phase 1, phase 2, the top of that image on the right, and then phase 3, Minnesota to Benson. Project purpose, great project purpose. Everybody in the community wholeheartedly backs this project in trying to deliver some important improvements to the community. We haven't heard a lot of concern about making improvements in the corridor. So lots of concerns with crashes, pedestrian and transit, and biking facilities, and lots of drainage infrastructure to try to address. Just to bring everybody into the same circle as to what we're talking about for the existing condition. So it's a winding roadway, got lots of intersections with some cross streets, 3 signalized intersections, Benson 36th and Minnesota. Decent amount of traffic, but certainly not as much traffic as we would have seen in phase 2 of the project that the municipality delivered just north of here. So 8,000 to 10,000 vehicles a day. Got a 4-lane facility, feels narrow when you're driving down it in some of those lanes. And then a 35-mile speed limit and a very narrow right of way. And then as we move through the next couple slides, we'll see, what the feeling is like going down the corridor for our walkers, our bikers, and other modes of transportation, transit facilities, and other things. So generally, I'll just say that it's an uncomfortable experience. The project team went out and last fall and experienced it. We brought our kids out and walked and biked it, to make sure we were getting a number of different perspectives this spring/summer. We'll get out there with the public and have a virtual walkthrough where everybody else can kind of walk through it and give us some feedback on what it is that they see and feel. Transit facilities are a difficult thing in the corridor, very narrow. If you're walking through there, it is not comfortable by any means. No dedicated bicycle facilities. You've got people parking over the sidewalk from adjacent businesses, people backing out into the right of way over top of sidewalks, pulling over sidewalks. Just generally not conducive to a comfortable experience for all modes of travel. We've heard a lot of things from the public. We had a virtual open house. We've gone to the community council a number of times, and we've heard a lot of things. I won't go through all of it, but generally I kind of described a lot of the things that we heard. There's certainly plenty of opportunity to improve things. Lots of things to consider as we move through the corridor on what the eventual improvements will be. There's very narrow right of way, which we'll get to here in a second. Lots of safety concerns for all users. An ability for us to maintain everything. A lot of mixed uses and other things, and certainly some desires to change some things into a different experience. We quickly went through an alternative analysis already to look at the major alternatives, 4-lane versus 3-lane, keeping the existing kind of look to it. And pretty overwhelmingly, the public is in support of putting in a 2-way left turn lane, road diet kind of alternative. And so we pivoted towards that, but just wanted to confirm that we were all moving forward in the right direction. That did not take much time at all. So quickly here, we can look at the overall right-of-way picture down the corridor. It's a small map, but the colors help. So 70 foot of right-of-way or greater is in the yellow spaces. In the orange spaces, you'll see 65 feet wide or approximately there. And blue would be 60 feet. And so generally through the main corridor, you'd see a 60-foot wide right-of-way. So a very constrained space trying to fit a lot of uses into it. We are advancing and looking at a number of different alternatives. I'll be honest that we have not shown these to the public outside of the TAC meeting, so you're getting the first look at what we're looking at. Certainly we anticipate going out to the public and having lots of conversations about these moving forward, but before doing so, we wanted to make sure to bring it to the policy committee. So we're looking at, this would be what we'd characterize as the phase 2 section. So the previous section north of Northern Lights. And so the only difference between this section and the one north of Northern Lights is the two-way left turn lane was a 12-foot lane as opposed to a 14-foot lane, which didn't meet design criteria manual from the municipality of Anchorage. So right now we're showing a 14-foot lane. This overall width is 65 feet. The previous width of that other project was 62 feet. And the reason for that is we've included 1 foot outside of this in order to accommodate signs and other things in order to make sure that we comply with federal processes and right-of-way needs. We are looking to narrow all of these cross sections. I'll just say that because we're trying to fit largely within a 60-foot right-of-way. All of these options that you're seeing are 65 feet wide. So this one is a modified option 1, which basically takes that bike lane and puts it up on the sidewalk. There's pros and cons associated with this. It does not fit within the existing right-of-way, just like the last alternative and just like the next one. It does meet the design criteria manual in regards to providing facilities for both walkers, bikers, and all of that. And then this last one is shrinking up the sidewalk from 8 foot to 7 foot, and then widening out the bike lane to 6 foot. And so the bike lane in that alternative 1, which was the previous phase, is cross section, didn't include a bike lane that was wide enough to meet standards. And so this is trying to widen the bike lane but narrow the sidewalk or the pathway. That would make the sidewalk not a shared use pathway, so not comfortable for bikers, but it is a different value shown on bikers versus walkers, trying to find that balance again. In the tip scope that you guys previously saw, it eliminated said the project shall not include improvements to the Minnesota intersection except ADA requirements on the east side. That really limited us in a number of aspects, and so I'll just flip over to that. The problem that we quickly identified about a month ago was how to treat the Spenard Road intersection and east of there. So currently the existing lane configuration on the left side is a left, a through left, and a through right coming from the west side. And so ultimately there's 2 receiving lanes on the east side. Proposed after Minnesota is repaved, they're going to rework the signal and it'll change a little bit, not demonstrably from what we need to be concerned with on the Spenard Road receiving side. It'll be a left, a through, and a through right. But in both of these situations, we've got 2 receiving lanes that we need to accept on the east side. And the problem is with a constrained right-of-way, how do you deal with that? So not being able to work at all on the west side puts us into a wider space on the east side. We're working with DOT traffic section and the municipality's traffic section to try to sauce all this out. I'll say that all of the alternatives that you're seeing now all have not been vetted fully from the traffic side, and we're working on that. But what you see here is 2 receiving lanes on the east side, and then bike and ped facilities basically on the south side of the roadway that are comparable to what you have out there today. So basically a 4 to 5 foot wide sidewalk, no bike lane on the south side. And that's to try to avoid huge right-of-way impacts on the southern side of Spenard Road. And so this is the, save a lot of right-of-way impacts and potential impacts to businesses and other things. Alternative, while receiving 2 lanes on the east side of Spenard. The next alternative you'll see is what happens when we try to put in sidewalk facilities and bike lane facilities on the east side while still receiving 2 lanes from across the intersection on Spenard, and what that may look like as far as right-of-way impacts. So heavy impact to the parking facilities for the bowling alley, heavy impacts to each of these parcels and potential acquisition of both of those properties and businesses in full, and then carrying those 2 lanes to drop the lane at 36th Avenue. Which takes us to the next alternative, which again hasn't been vetted fully by the traffic sections of both the department and the municipality of Anchorage, but it's a 1 lane receiving lane, which requires some work on the west side of Minnesota in order to narrow things down and only have 1 through lane. So that this shows that we've got bike lane facilities, multi-use pathways, but with less impact, less right-of-way impact on the southern side to a number of the businesses in that space. And so we're working through some of those things right now. Ultimately, the ability to do work on the west side may accommodate us having less impact on the east side. Already with the inability to do work on the west side of Minnesota intersection, according to the federal process, we'll have to go back and look at impacts to the railroad crossing, which are well west of here. But according to the federal process, any railroad crossing that is near the project has to be analyzed to meet certain criteria, which likely pushes us into, just looking at it and maybe making improvements to it. It seems very counterintuitive. However, that is how the federal process works associated with these projects that are quote unquote near them. That's about all we had. We're still working through a number of other things. We've got public involvement opportunities going out to the community, but before we got too far ahead, and we wanted to make sure to come by and show you the progress thus far on the project.
Thank you, Sean. I see a hand up already, but are there any questions or comments by the committee? Mr. Weddleton, you were first.
Thanks. I have a few, so feel free to give me the hook if someone else raises their hand. One thing, since it's the most recent thing you talked about, Sean, if you leave that image up,
Sure.
Under your challenge there, right there. And I suppose you'll do traffic counts. I just, coming off of, heading west or east on Spenard there, is the traffic so high that you need 2 lanes? I've driven it 1,000 times. I couldn't tell you. I don't know. But, if there were, better facilities along 36 between Spenard and Minnesota, and you could pull biking and walking away from that stretch, is that, that's not in this project definition, so I imagine you're restricted. Is there some way to include that to be somewhat simultaneous, and maybe then you don't need the bike and ped on this stretch to be quite as nice?
So I'll just speak to what we know right now. So we've done some modeling. We've done some work with both traffic sections. There's still some disagreement. Those section from, you know, those two different traffic sections, it may be viable. The problem is that especially when you're talking about the Minnesota intersection, is what do the backups look like on the west side? And so, you know, you've got a certain traffic demand on the west side, and by our modeling, if we don't do it correctly, you push backups all the way past and through the railroad crossing. And so it's about how the public uses and drops that lane on the west side and how we engineer it, but then also how they actually use it. And so that's the disagreement right now is how, you know, we can model things, but how is the public actually going to use it? I mean, we can have drop lanes and other things like, let's say, you know, in this figure right here, we drop that second lane very quickly. Well, what's the likelihood that a lot of users are going to even use that lane and then, you know, and then merge over into the other lane? And so there's what we call usability factors and you know, other things that we have to sauce out. I don't know if there's the question entirely.
Right. So is there anything we could do on that little stretch of 36 to take bike and peds onto there to Minnesota?
As of right now, that's not within, we don't have that in our project definition for scope. We could, I don't know that it would measurably remove that eastern movement from the west side. Because really that's the thing that's biting us is the eastbound Spinard.
Right. Well, I was thinking more you would keep your two lanes, but put, you know, if you're bicycling or walking, you take 36, and then kind of the system works well, even though that particular stretch would not be optimal for bikers and walkers. That might be acceptable.
36 is rather narrow, and you know, if the policy committee would like the project to look at alternatives that went and improved things down 36th Avenue and on Minnesota, because we've still got a narrow corridor on Minnesota. You know, the project could do that, but it is very narrow down 36th, and so the question is whether or not you know, we'd have some major impacts to adjacent right of way there.
Okay, I have more, but to the chair, I see other hands up. I'm happy to wait.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Schutte, you were next.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to ask a follow-up question to Mr. Weddleton's point. So John, the suggestion you're making is that non-motorized and bike traffic doesn't actually travel southwest on Spinard. It gets diverted on the 36th. And I guess the follow-up question is if that's what you're describing, which I think you are, what happens when that gets to Minnesota?
But yeah, that'll be a mess there too. It's a mess one point or the other. So I understand the weaknesses here. You know, I used to live in Sand Lake and bike. You know, I would go through neighborhoods more often, and I'm a pretty brave cyclist. But I'll tell you, this stretch, when you hit Minnesota,
yeah,
I'm very comfortable with traffic, but that is such a mess there. You know, I'll ride in with cars, and I avoid that. And you know, so I would take 36 and infringe on the rules a bit and pop over the median, and head west. But and I know you can't encourage that. So I don't know. And I know these are explored many times, and there was that whole idea of the couplet and so on. You know, and I think we pulled 36th and the intersection out of this project to get away from that controversy holding it up. So I guess I'm broaching it again and probably shouldn't. But.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Ms. Alatel, you have your hand up as well. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So along the same lines as the questions Mr. Weddleton asked, I guess I'm curious if this is short on right of way, how are the alternatives being vetted against those recommendations in the Vision Zero plan? I agree that this is a dicey area to bicycle on currently, and so but would love to. Or even walk, having engaged with this area quite a bit. So I would just like to make sure that that's flagged and looked at closely as we're in this design phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alatel. Mr. Weddleton, do you have anything further?
Yeah, a couple. One is, I guess, a result of kind of watching that northern end being built, and there were huge structures built. It seems like they're as big as a house underground, and all you see is a little manhole cover leads to this huge open space. And my understanding is that was for MLMP to be able to run extra wires and so on underground. And if they wanted to add some, they didn't have to dig things up, which seems tremendous. But my understanding is those are only available for MLMP, which I guess would be Chugach Electric now. But are there, I mean, what are the rules there? I mean, it seems like those should be available for, phone and internet and everything, anything underneath that would go underneath the ground. Is that possible to create that requirement, or what does it take to make that happen?
Sure. So utiliducts is what we would generally call those, and we've used them sporadically throughout the Department of Transportation's corridors. There's certainly some pros and cons associated with them. Generally, we do not go with them. We've got extensive ones down DeBar Road, and really it hampers a lot of our potential rebuilds throughout the space. It certainly does have some benefits. I would say that we have not really dove into the utility relocation portions of this. That will be one of the tools that will be on the table for sure. And when we do engage in that, it will have to follow all federal rules, regulations, and other things. And so that might be a tool that's in the toolbox that we might utilize.
Okay, well, if you do a utiliduct, it'd be nice if it were available for everybody then, I mean, should you decide to do them.
Sure. Because I wasn't on the last phase, I'm not sure whether or not that was paid for specifically by them, or whether or not the municipality participated in that. You might, if they're paying for their own facility, forcing them to allow others into their utiliduct might not be something that we could do. But there are certain things that are eligible and certain things that are not eligible, which forces certain utility companies to have to rebuild some of their own systems throughout the space.
Yeah, well, I think that's partly a Shooty question, but we do on cell towers require that they make it available for other companies to use them, co-locate.
Yeah.
So there's a precedent there. Does Shooty want to chime in on utiliducts? I don't.
So through the chair, that's correct, Mr. Weddleton and Mr. Baskey, that joint trenching agreements when utility lines are coming down is very common. The idea of shared utilidors or conduits is also something that's not widespread, but also practiced between the utilities. And I think it's something that we would likely see happen with this project in the same way that the co-location of utilities is proposed for other road projects where the overhead poles are coming down.
Okay, so Chris, you're saying that it is actually typical to have co-location?
Yeah, it's not 100% typical, John, but it does happen often.
Oh, that's good. I got two more, Todd, if I.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so Sean, are there statistics or some we've got several years now with the north end where we did the road diet. Do we have statistics on the amount of traffic going through there, and then, maybe traffic speeds from point to point that we could compare to prior to the project?
So I know that we made some requests for that. I don't know if anybody on the line from our team has any of that at their fingertips, but I know that we looked at overall crash numbers. We were looking at speeds and some other things, but I don't know that I've got those numbers right in front of us.
Okay. Seems like a good input for this and good general interest too, feedback on how these projects work. And then one last one, and you touched on it, but the center turn lane is at 14 feet. And you said the DCM won't let it go below 12?
DCM has 14 foot as standard, and so we are looking to minimize the overall cross-sectional width, but until we are not proposing one yet. We'll say that anything narrower yet.
Okay, so what's like the AASHTO rule? I mean, because it seems like I've seen them not in Anchorage, but I've seen them as narrow as 10 in some places.
There's a lot of shoulds across the board on what you would like to put it at. Quite often, I'll just say, for instance, the Department of Transportation will use anywhere from 14 to 16 feet for our two-way left turn lanes in anticipation that at some point in time in the future, you would need to put in left turn pockets, channelized left turn pockets with a little bit of median in there. And so it sets yourself up for, additional access management to some of the roads. Usually that's on our arterials and other things. So there's a lot of reasons why you might want wider width for trucking and other things and comfort. Certainly there's reasons to reduce the overall width as well.
Okay, yeah, that's a good insight. Thanks. Because there could be a lot of development. There will be development here. Chugach Way is, Cookland housing is poised for more, and I think further up that trailer court will eventually be turned into more units. And okay, all right, good. Thank you. That's it for me. Thanks, Todd.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments by the committee? Very well. Any comments from the public?
There are two I placed in the chat. I can read them if you can't see them.
Can you read them, please?
Sure. From Lindsay, Spenard community has advocated for Minnesota Drive to be considered as an active transportation corridor, but that has not been moved forward. Spenard Road is the designated primary active transportation corridor and should have bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And then a second comment from Lindsay, Spenard Community Council does not support the couplet at Minnesota and 36. Sorry to be a broken record.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll wait just a few more seconds to see if there are any more comments. No further public comments.
Thank you. Greg, are there any additional project or plan updates? I couldn't hear you, but I'll take that as none. Moving on to general information.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I said Mr. Weddleton has his hand up, and I didn't know if he had additional comments or if that was just a leftover.
That's a leftover. Sorry. I guess I have to go take it.
That's up for project and plan update, sir.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to general information. Agenda item 7A, COVID funding update. Craig?
I will give you a quick update. I think you're aware of those funds. People are referring to them as the CRRSA funds, CRRSAA. I did discuss this with Adam Moser, who's the MPO coordinator for DOT down in headquarters in Juneau. And he said they are still, since the legislature is still in session, they haven't quite ironed out all the details on how those funds are going to be spent. So we're still in a little holding pattern. Nothing yet to report in terms of we can start allocating those funds. So that's the update on that.
Thank you, Craig. Are there any questions or comments by the committee? Seeing none. Any comments by the public?
I'll start the clock. No public comments.
Thank you. Agenda item 7B, AMATS newsletter.
Yes,
Greg?
Mr. Chair, I will start. I'm very, very overjoyed and happy to report about this. We've thought about having a newsletter for quite some time, and Christine has created what I think is a really impressive document. This will be, we're kind of just showing it to you because you probably haven't seen it before unless you looked at it by yourself. But in other words, this will be a normal, every quarter you'll see it, but for right now, we just want to kind of go over the format of it, and I'll turn it over to Christine so she can share all the amazing work that she did.
Thanks, Craig. Just to show you where it is on our website. So right now, the web banner is the first newsletter. Eventually,
We don't see it on yet.
You don't see it?
No, not yet.
Let me see.
Still not there yet. I can try and share it online and you can work through it.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Do you want to try to pull it up?
Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up on mine real quick. See if folks can see. Do they see our homepage yet?
Not yet.
Nope.
We love the technical difficulties. Huh, awesome.
I still see it as if Sean is talking on my screen.
Is he still sharing? Is that what it says?
Let me see. No?
Let me try again. See if that works any better.
There it is.
There it is.
That's
Okay.
working.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So up at the top here, I'll let Christine talk and I'll try and track it with the mouse as she's talking.
But just before you click it, if you scroll down to the side, left-hand side, there's, eventually that web banner will be something else that we need to bring attention to. So now all the newsletters will be right there in the newsletter column, newsletter page. But if you click on that banner, Craig, it should pull it up. And so it says story map. If anybody needs a printed copy, translated copy, we're happy to do that. You can just scroll down. It's going to always have these sections. So that top bar at the top, when you're reading it, they'll stay up there. So you can also just jump to whichever section you're particularly interested in. So first, it'll just be what's in the issue. So just kind of each section, what particular items are in those sections. You can keep scrolling, message, from Craig. So we'll have just kind of an overview of what happened that quarter. We can keep going.
I apologize for the 5-head there, and we'll just move past that.
And then we'll have a section for the committees, just some important things that came out of those, any seat changes that came about in that quarter. And keep scrolling. And spotlight, we'd like to spotlight either a staff member or committee member. So hopefully you all will want to participate in the coming quarters. Aaron has volunteered to participate this quarter with his lovely companion Dozer. And keep scrolling. In community, if there's particular events, Joni went on a winter bike tour with Donovan from DOT just to look at bike facilities and some of the complications and maintenance issues. So they just did a tour. This is the map of where they visited. They were kind of introducing Julius to the area. So he came down from Juneau. And that's a state bicycle and pedestrian coordinator. And then just plans and programs. So what plans are currently being worked on? So we're highlighting the 2050, even though the 2040 just came out. It's a long planning process. So Aaron's already got the RFP out, and they're currently reviewing consultant applications. Kind of a general overview of timeline with what particular milestones will be for that plan. And then Amendment 2, which we talked about today. And those are in the and I'm always going to kind of section them out by primary programs and secondary programs. So just kind of to be familiar with AMATS and how they function. So secondary programs and then motorized plan. We're highlighting the open house that Joni did in February. And we had a couple of surveys during that. So just kind of highlighting how people, with some visuals, how people answered some of those questions. And then just to note that Joni's working through all the comments. There's over 800 plus individual comments for the plan. And so that's just to check back for information. The Spinard Corridor Plan has been released and it's on our website. Title 21 parking. Tom Davis from Long Ridge Planning, he visited 3 of our committees for this project. So we wanted to highlight that project and kind of the coordination with planning and current planning. We can keep going, Craig. And then there always be transit sections. So in this quarter, they wanted to just highlight that they do have flat tire bike racks on all of the buses now. They also did a ridership survey to see how COVID-19 has impacted riders and asked them some questions moving forward. And then those are just some charts of a couple of the questions in that survey, but there's a link to the actual survey as well. And then they released a 2020 system report card. They do that annually. That goes over each route, ridership, and some of the performance measures that they look at. And then Transportation 101, just kind of a general topic. On this one, we just kind of went very basic, what is an MPO? And then at the bottom, we'll just highlight the upcoming meetings for the next quarter. And then right under that, there is to sign up for an email list. It's set up. So even if you're on the list, you could click on that and update your preferences so that you could say, I want all the policy committee or just particular email so you don't get too many from us. And then there's a survey. So after you've looked at this, you could provide us feedback. That would be great. So we can always improve it and make it better. And that's about all I have to say.
Thank you, Christine. Are there any questions or comments by the committee? Mr. Schutte, you got your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to pass along kudos on this. I'm very impressed with it. Good work. I think it looks very helpful, very informative.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments by the committee? Seeing none, Any comments by the public?
I'll start the clock now. No public comments.
Thank you. Does staff or committee members have any other general information items to present at this time?
Nothing from me, sir.
Thank you, Craig. With that, moving on to item 8, committee comments. Does the committee have any comments to add today? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 9, public comments. Are there any comments from the public at this time?
We didn't receive any, but I will start the clock one more time. There are no public comments.
Thank you. Item 10, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Shooty, move.
Move to adjourn.
I got a move by
Shooty,
Shooties and a second by Weddleton.
Either way.
Either way, are there any objections to are there any objections to approving the motion? Seeing none, the motion is approved. The meeting is adjourned. The time is 2:37.
Thank you.
all.
Thanks, Todd.